In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd stumbled into a cave and changed biblical history forever. But what if the scrolls he found that day were only the beginning? What if the texts that reached museums and scholars represent just a fraction of what was hidden in those ancient caves? What if some of the most important manuscripts ever written are still missing, or were deliberately kept from the world? The question isn't whether the Dead Sea Scrolls exist. The question is, where are the rest of them? In the spring of 1947, near the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea, a young Bedouin named Muhammad Edahadib threw a stone into a cave and heard the sound of shattering pottery. Inside those clay jars lay manuscripts that had been hidden for nearly 2,000 years, texts that predated any known biblical manuscript by a millennium. Documents that would force scholars to reconsider everything they thought they knew about ancient Judaism and early Christianity. Over the following decade, 11 caves in the Qumran region yielded nearly 900 manuscripts, fragments of every book of the Hebrew Bible, except Esther, Psalms, Prophecies, Community Rules, Apocalyptic visions. The discovery was unprecedented, but from the very beginning, something didn't add up. And tonight, we examine what might still be hidden. The Dead Sea Scrolls that reached the public contain extraordinary material. Biblical texts copied centuries before the oldest manuscripts previously known. The complete book of Isaiah, dated to 125 BCE, virtually identical to versions used today, proving the accuracy of biblical transmission across millennia. But they also contain something else. Texts never seen before. The community rule, describing the practices of a mysterious Jewish sect. The war scroll, detailing an apocalyptic final battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. The temple scroll, outlining a vision of a perfect temple that was never built. These weren't just religious documents. They were windows into a lost world, a Judaism more diverse, more complex, more mystical than anyone had imagined. They revealed that in the centuries before Christ, multiple competing interpretations of Scripture existed. Alternative traditions, different understandings of prophecy and law. Yet scholars quickly noticed something troubling: gaps in the numbering system, references to texts that couldn't be found, testimonies from the Bedouin finders that didn't match the official inventory. Not all the scrolls were accounted for. The Bedouin who first discovered the scrolls were not archaeologists. They were tribesmen who recognized the commercial value of ancient manuscripts. Before scholars arrived, these men had already begun removing materials from the caves, selling them, trading them, transporting them across borders. Some scrolls reached antiquities dealers in Bethlehem and Jerusalem. Others disappeared into private collections. A black market emerged almost immediately. Fragments changed hands in back rooms and hotel lobbies. Prices escalated. And with each transaction, the trail grew colder. Decades later, some of these Bedouin would speak of scrolls they had seen but could not produce. Texts they had handled but no longer possessed. Manuscripts that, according to their accounts, had been sold to buyers whose identities were never disclosed. Were they telling the truth, or inflating their role in the discovery? The unsettling reality is that we may never know exactly what was in those caves when they were first opened. If scrolls are missing, what might they contain? Some scholars theorize the existence of lost gospels or teachings that circulated in early Jewish Christian communities, texts that presented alternative understandings of Messianic prophecy, interpretations that didn't align with the traditions that would eventually become orthodox. Others suggest apocalyptic writings that went beyond what was preserved. The Qumran community was deeply concerned with the end times, with divine judgment, with the coming war between good and evil. What if they possessed prophetic texts deemed too dangerous or too specific to preserve? There's also the possibility of forbidden interpretations. The scrolls already reveal that ancient Jewish scholars sometimes interpreted scripture in ways radically different from later rabbinical tradition. What if some interpretations were considered so controversial that they were deliberately excluded from the official collection? And then there are the sectarian documents. The Qumran community wasn't alone. Other Jewish groups existed in the Second Temple period, each with their own texts, their own traditions, their own sacred writings. If members of these groups also hid manuscripts in the Judean wilderness, those documents remain undiscovered. The mystery deepens when we ask, why were these scrolls hidden in the first place? The traditional explanation is preservation. In the years leading up to 70 CE, the Roman Empire was tightening its grip on Judea. Tensions escalated, rebellion erupted. The Qumran community, sensing the coming destruction, sealed their most precious texts in jars and hid them in caves, hoping to retrieve them when peace returned. But they never came back. Another theory suggests something more deliberate. What if certain texts were hidden, not just from the Romans, but from other Jewish authorities? What if the Qumran sect possessed writings that contradicted the emerging religious establishment? There's also the question of theological control. Early Christianity was born in a world of competing beliefs. Multiple groups claimed to follow the true path. As orthodoxy solidified, texts that didn't fit were sometimes suppressed, destroyed, or lost. Could some Dead Sea Scrolls have fallen into this category? The scrolls that survived were preserved by accident and isolation. The ones that disappeared may have been removed by intention. When the first scrolls reached scholars in the late 1940s and early 1950s, access was tightly controlled. A small team of academics was granted exclusive rights to study and publish the materials. Decades passed. Other researchers were denied access. Rumors spread that the team was deliberately suppressing certain texts because of their controversial content. By the 1990s, the situation had reached a breaking point. Scholars outside the original team demanded access. Questions were raised. Why the delay? What was being hidden? Were theological concerns influencing what was published? Eventually, pressure forced the release of all materials. The full corpus became available, and while the delayed texts proved fascinating, they didn't contain the bombshells some had feared or hoped for. But this raises another question. Were those the only texts that existed? Some fragments surfaced decades after the initial discoveries. In 2017, archaeologists announced they had found a 12th cave at Qumran. It had been looted in the 1950s, but evidence suggested scrolls had once been stored there. Who took them? Where did they go? That same year, the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., admitted that several Dead Sea Scroll fragments in its collection were modern forgeries. The black market for scroll fragments had become so lucrative that forgers were creating fake texts to meet demand. But this also meant genuine fragments were circulating outside official channels. In recent years, the Israel Antiquities Authority has conducted new surveys of the Judean desert, using advanced technology to search for caves that might have been overlooked. In 2021, they announced the discovery of dozens of new scroll fragments, the first such find in 60 years. The texts were small, fragmentary, but they proved one crucial point. More scrolls are out there. The question is, where? The implications of missing scrolls extend beyond academic curiosity. These texts could reshape our understanding of biblical history. They could reveal how ancient communities interpreted prophecy, how they viewed the coming Messiah, how they understood the nature of God and humanity. Consider the Book of Enoch, fragments of which were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. For centuries, this text was considered lost in the West, preserved only in Ethiopian Christianity. The scrolls proved it had been read and revered by some Jewish communities in the Second Temple period. What other lost books might have circulated? Or consider the Genesis Apocryphon, a retelling of Genesis with expanded narratives and details not found in the canonical text. It shows that ancient readers weren't simply preserving scripture. They were interpreting it, expanding it, asking questions about gaps in the narrative. If more scrolls exist, they could provide answers to questions we've asked for centuries, or they could raise new questions we haven't yet imagined. This mystery connects directly to our previous investigations. In our episode on Noah's true origin according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, we explored how the Genesis Apocryphon reveals details about Noah's birth that aren't in the Bible. That's just one scroll. Imagine what others might contain. When we examined what existed before Adam, we touched on ancient Jewish traditions that believed in pre-Adamic creation. Could lost scrolls contain more information about these beliefs? And when we investigated the angels imprisoned in the Euphrates, we drew on apocalyptic texts similar to those found at Qumran. The scrolls we have are fragmentary. What if complete versions still exist, buried in some forgotten cave or locked away in a private collection? History is not a closed book. It's an ongoing investigation, and sometimes the most important evidence is the evidence we haven't found yet. If this exploration into ancient mysteries has drawn you deeper, there's more you need to see. Go back and watch the Dead Sea Scroll that reveals Noah's true origin to understand how these ancient texts challenge what we've been taught. Discover what existed before Adam to uncover the forgotten history that predates Genesis. And don't miss the angels imprisoned in the Euphrates, where ancient prophecy meets modern geography. Subscribe now and turn on notifications. We're uncovering mysteries that have been buried for millennia, and each episode brings us closer to truths that have been hidden in plain sight. Tell us in the comments, do you believe more scrolls are still hidden? And if they're found, do you think they'll be shared with the world or kept secret? In our next episode, we're going even deeper into a mystery so closely guarded that even mentioning it has been considered dangerous. The ancient world still has secrets to tell, and we're just beginning to listen.